Good evening and welcome to our special broadcast. Tonight we delve into a profoundly important and often contentious question. Should recreational drugs be legalized nationwide? It's a topic that sparks passionate debate, touching on issues of public health, individual liberty, and societal order. We have two distinguished guests with us to explore this complex issue. Arguing for regulated legalization is Dr. Ben Carter, a respected public health researcher. And presenting the case against legalization is Ms. Emily Hughes, a former law enforcement officer with extensive field experience. Our format will begin with opening statements from each of our guests, followed by rebuttals. We will then move into a moderated discussion, and finally, each guest will deliver a closing statement. Let's begin.
Thank you, Sarah. Good evening. My position is straightforward. The prohibition of recreational drugs has been a costly and ineffective experiment. It's time for a pragmatic shift towards legalization and comprehensive regulation. For decades, we've poured billions into a failed to curtail drug use. Instead, it has fueled a dangerous and violent black market, enriching criminal organizations while offering no protection to consumers. Under a regulated system, we can implement stringent quality controls. This means consumers would have access to products of known purity and potency, significantly reducing the risks of overdose or harm from contaminated substances, which are rampant in the illicit market. Furthermore, the tax revenue generated from legal sales could be substantial. These funds could be strategically reinvested into vital public services, robust drug education programs, accessible addiction treatment facilities, and comprehensive mental health support systems. This isn't about encouraging drug use. It's about acknowledging reality and choosing a path of harm reduction. It's about respecting adult autonomy within a carefully constructed framework that prioritizes public health and safety over ineffective criminalization. We can dismantle the criminal enterprises that profit from prohibition and redirect law enforcement resources towards more pressing community safety needs. It's a public health approach to a public health issue.
Good evening, Sarah. Dr. Carter. While I appreciate Dr. Carter's perspective, I must firmly state that the nationwide legalization of recreational drugs would be a grave mistake, posing unacceptable risks to our communities. My experience in law enforcement has shown me the devastating impact of drug abuse firsthand on individuals, families, and entire neighborhoods. To intentionally make these substances more accessible seems counterintuitive to public well-being. Proponents often downplay the potential for a significant rise in addiction rates. Legalization inherently normalizes drug use, and increased availability, even with regulation, will inevitably lead to more people developing substance abuse disorders. Consider the public health consequences. An increase in incidence of driving under the influence, putting innocent lives at risk. We must also anticipate a surge in drug-related mental health issues, further straining our already burdened healthcare systems. The argument that healthcare systems will benefit from tax revenue is speculative at best. The costs associated with increased addiction, emergency room visits, and long-term treatment could easily eclipse any financial gains. And what about the impact on our youth? Increased accessibility and the perceived societal endorsement that comes with legalization could make drugs far more appealing and available to young, vulnerable individuals, potentially derailing their futures. The message we send is critical, and legalization sends the wrong one. Our focus should remain on prevention, robust education about the dangers of drug use, and providing support for those struggling with addiction, not on opening the floodgates to substances that have proven to be destructive.
Ms. Hughes raises valid concerns, particularly regarding addiction and public safety, which I share. However, the current system of prohibition is demonstrably failing to address these issues effectively. Regarding addiction, a regulated market doesn't mean a free-for-all. It means we can channel significant portions of the tax revenue, as I mentioned, directly into evidence-based prevention programs and vastly expanded, accessible treatment services. Under prohibition, these resources are scarce, and users are often hidden in the shadows, afraid to seek help due to criminalization. As for public safety, the idea that prohibition keeps us safer is a dangerous illusion. The illicit drug trade is inherently violent and uncontrolled. Products are frequently adulterated with fentanyl or other dangerous substances, leading to accidental overdoses. A legal, regulated market would introduce quality control and remove the criminal element, making things safer, not more dangerous. Our aim is not to encourage drug use, but to manage an existing reality with more compassion, intelligence, and effectiveness. It's about harm reduction, acknowledging that some individuals will choose to use substances and ensuring they can do so if they choose with minimized risk, while simultaneously offering robust support for those who wish to abstain or seek treatment.
Dr. Carter's vision of a smoothly regulated market funded by tax revenues sounds appealing, but I believe it's overly optimistic and overlooks significant practical challenges and potential negative consequences. The argument that tax revenue will solve all our problems is a common one, but the societal costs associated with increased drug use, such as heightened healthcare demands, lost productivity in the workforce, and the potential for increased crime rates related to addiction, could easily dwarf any income from drug sales. We might be trading one set of problems for another, potentially larger set. Furthermore, the effectiveness of regulation is questionable. We already struggle immensely to control youth access to legal substances like alcohol and tobacco, despite stringent laws and licensing. Why would we expect a different outcome with drugs that are often more addictive or potent? A black market will likely persist, offering cheaper, unregulated products to those who wish to avoid taxes or age restrictions, or seek substances not included in the legal framework. And let's not forget the powerful message that legalization sends. It normalizes behavior that is inherently risky, particularly for young people and vulnerable populations, undermining decades of prevention efforts.
Dr. Carter, Ms. Hughes raised serious concerns about youth access, a critical point for many. How would a legalized system specifically protect young people more effectively than the current prohibition model, which, as we know, already sees significant youth drug use?
That's a crucial question, Sarah. Firstly, a legal framework allows for strict, government-enforced age verification at licensed points of sale, something entirely absent in the illicit market. Think of it like alcohol or tobacco sales, but potentially with even more robust checks, perhaps using digital ID verification. Secondly, a significant portion of the tax revenue generated can, and should, be earmarked for targeted, evidence-based drug education and prevention campaigns in schools and communities. These campaigns can be more honest and effective when not operating under the shadow of total prohibition, focusing on harm reduction and responsible choices for adults, while strongly discouraging youth use. Moreover, by dismantling the illegal market, we remove the allure of forbidden fruit that often attracts young people. Licensed vendors have a strong incentive: the risk of losing their license and facing severe penalties to prevent sales to minors, unlike street dealers who actively target vulnerable youth. Prohibition has clearly failed to keep drugs out of the hands of young people. A regulated system offers far more tools and accountability to genuinely address this persistent problem.
Ms. Hughes, Dr. Carter has repeatedly mentioned product safety and the dangers of the black market. Under the current system of prohibition, how are consumers actually protected from contaminated or dangerously potent illegal drugs? And isn't that a massive, unaddressed public health risk in itself?
Sarah, the fundamental aim of prohibition is to prevent drug use altogether, thereby eliminating exposure to any and all risks associated with these substances, including contamination or unpredictable potency. The primary protection we offer is the strong discouragement of use through legal and educational means. While it's true that illegal drugs carry inherent dangers due to their unregulated nature, the solution isn't to legitimize these substances and make them more readily available. That would be akin to saying that because some people drive recklessly, we should make it easier for everyone to obtain a car without proper training or licensing. Our focus should be on redoubling our efforts in law enforcement to disrupt the supply chains of these dangerous drugs, and on bolstering educational initiatives that clearly outline the severe risks involved. Facilitating access, even to supposedly safer versions, still opens the door to the harms of the drugs themselves, not just the contaminants. The public health risk you mention is a consequence of illegal activity, and the answer is to combat that activity, not to surrender to it by legalizing the products it sells.
Dr. Carter, do you have a question for Ms. Hughes based on what has been discussed or her previous points?
Yes, thank you. Ms. Hughes, you have a background in law enforcement, and I respect your commitment to public safety. Given the immense law enforcement resources, personnel, budget, court time, currently dedicated to enforcing drug prohibition, how do you envision these resources might be reallocated under a regulated system to address other critical public safety issues more effectively? Could we not, for example, better tackle issues like impaired driving, domestic violence, or even provide more community policing if we weren't expending so much effort on low-level drug offenses?
Dr. Carter, your question presumes that legalization would somehow simplify law enforcement's role or free up vast resources without creating new, complex challenges. I believe that's a miscalculation. A legalized market would require a new and potentially very costly regulatory and enforcement bureaucracy to oversee licensing, ensure compliance with product standards, monitor sales, and prevent diversion to the black market or to minors. Furthermore, as I mentioned, a black market for cheaper, untaxed, or more potent versions of these drugs would likely persist, demanding continued law enforcement attention. We might also see an increase in drug-related public disorder issues or impaired driving incidents that would require an even greater law enforcement response than we currently provide. The resources currently dedicated to combating drug trafficking are also crucial for addressing the organized crime elements that are often involved in other serious criminal activities. Weakening our stance on drugs could inadvertently strengthen these criminal networks in other areas.
Ms. Hughes, it's now your turn to pose a question directly to Dr. Carter.
Dr. Carter, we have decades of experience with legal, regulated substances like alcohol and tobacco, and despite extensive regulation, they continue to cause enormous public health problems, widespread addiction, and significant mortality. Given this track record, why should we expect that recreational drugs, many of which possess a higher addiction potential or carry more immediate and severe health impacts, would be any different under a regulated model? Aren't we just risking adding another layer of substantial public health burden, regardless of the regulatory framework proposed?
That's a very fair and important question, Ms. Hughes. It's true that alcohol and tobacco have caused, and continue to cause, significant harm. However, the key is that we have learned a great deal from the historical regulation and initial underregulation of these substances. These lessons are invaluable. For instance, we now understand the power of marketing restrictions, plain packaging, taxation strategies specifically designed to reduce consumption, and targeted public health campaigns. Regulations for newly legalized drugs could be designed from the outset to be much stricter and more health-focused than the frameworks that evolved over time for alcohol and tobacco, incorporating these hard-won lessons. Furthermore, prohibition doesn't eliminate these health burdens. It often exacerbates them by driving users away from healthcare and support, and by ensuring products are of unknown and dangerous quality. A regulated system allows for open discussion, research, and intervention. Different drugs also have different risk profiles, and regulations can be tailored specifically to the risks of each substance, rather than a one-size-fits-all prohibition or a replication of alcohol-tobacco models. The goal is to minimize harm. While no system is perfect, a carefully regulated one offers more tools for public health than the current punitive approach. In closing, I urge us to consider a shift from a policy of prohibition that has demonstrably failed towards a pragmatic and evidence-based approach of legalization with robust regulation. This is not an endorsement of drug use, but an acceptance of its reality and a commitment to managing it more safely and effectively. Legalization allows us to introduce crucial product safety standards, severely undermining the dangerous black market. It provides an opportunity to generate significant tax revenue, which can be directly invested in public health initiatives, including comprehensive addiction treatment, mental health services, and effective drug education programs. This approach respects adult autonomy while establishing clear boundaries and safeguards. It is about reducing harm, enhancing public safety by redirecting law enforcement priorities, and treating substance use as a public health issue rather than primarily a criminal one. It's time for a more rational, compassionate, and effective strategy.
As we conclude, I must reiterate my profound concerns about the path of nationwide drug legalization. The potential risks to our public health, to community safety, and particularly to our nation's youth, are simply too significant to ignore or downplay with promises of regulation. We risk normalizing behaviors that are inherently harmful, potentially leading to increased rates of addiction, and a wide array of associated societal problems. The notion that we can perfectly regulate these substances and prevent all negative consequences seems, to me, dangerously naive, given our experiences with alcohol and tobacco. The message legalization sends, especially to impressionable young people, is that these drugs are acceptable, which could unravel decades of prevention efforts. Instead of embarking on this risky experiment, we should strengthen our current framework of prevention, expand access to effective treatment, and continue robust education about the real dangers of drug use. Let us not make a decision we may come to deeply regret.
Thank you, Dr. Carter, and thank you, Ms. Hughes, for a truly insightful and vigorous debate this evening. You've both presented compelling arguments and highlighted the profound complexities surrounding the question of recreational drug legalization. It's clear that there are deeply held convictions on both sides, rooted in genuine concerns for public welfare and individual rights. There are no easy answers, and the potential societal impacts are far-reaching. We hope this discussion has provided our audience with valuable perspectives to consider. We encourage everyone to reflect further on the points raised tonight. Thank you for joining us. Good evening.